All right, I will turn back in open session. I'll entertain a motion to appoint Jennifer Holst to patrol lieutenant with the Wausau Police Department.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations, Jennifer. Thank you for your service. All right, and there are no general agenda items, so we will move to our monthly presentations. Monthly presentation of the Fire Department operations by Chief Bartet.
Good morning. Monthly report in front of you. Any questions about it as we evolve in trying to find a new path for that monthly report? I think we're finding a really good pace with that right now. So each division anticipates that we're going to be asking for that early in the following month, and I'm asking them in their words to tell their story about what's going on in their division, and I think as they're getting comfortable with that, we're seeing more and more better storytelling basically about what we're doing outside the data sets that we're still including in there. So as always, if there's anything specifically you'd like to see us add for future reports, we'll definitely add that. We're working on the finalization of our annual report, which we'll be presenting in March, and going from there. So I think the other two agenda items I had was an update on the recruitment and retention. So recruitment and retention in 2021 was, as you guys well knew when you were hiring me as chief, and that it was going to be my biggest challenge. It was the biggest challenge in 2021. With 9 departures from the department, we had 5 retirements, 4 resignations. We carried open positions all the way through 2021. We had an astonishing amount of overtime, much of that overtime forced on employees, and it really became problematic. And so this year we've taken a very forward-leaning into that, actually stuff that we started last year, and I think was going to start bearing fruit for us now. The biggest being the recruitment film that we had Ethan Bars put together for us. If you've not had an opportunity to go look at that, I highly recommend you go to our YouTube page and look at that. I put a link in the report. How he captured the essence of the organizational culture, the community, the work that we do inside that little 4 minutes is astonishing to me. He stitched together 5 interviews with firefighter paramedics. We didn't want any chiefs interviewed for this. We didn't want any officers. We wanted firefighters speaking to other firefighters looking at joining our department. And he stitched very seamlessly together the 5 conversations, overlaying some very dramatic and compelling film on top of it. I think that the other thing that we've done right in the last year was the establishment of the lateral transfer program. We've successfully lateral transferred 3 new employees into the department between last year and the beginning of this year. Right now, with the 5 that we hired in the beginning of January, we've had 1 departure from the department since then. We have an anticipated retirement in March. Right now we sit at 1 open position in the department and 2 beginning of March. Actually last night, so the HR department posted the position in January. Last night at midnight closed the application period for firefighter paramedic. I talked to Jennifer Cannonberg, the HR specialist that's running that portion of it. As of Friday, we had 9 applicants. So we're doing very well there. I would anticipate that typically we see a spike over the weekend right before it's due of candidates applying. So I don't know what the number will be, but hopefully we're into the double digits and maybe well beyond. As far as applicants go, there's talk coming from those in the department that have friends working in other departments that we may see a number of lateral transfer applicants in this period. That has yet to remain to be seen. We're optimistic about that. Well, of course, lateral transfers really help us because they come with seasoned firefighter paramedics that can take a heavy workload on right away, and that steep learning curve that we have our first year, they really grasp our concepts quickly and quickly go to work. The other thing that we're doing right now, and I'll bridge into the additional firefighter initiative, is that we've been lobbying, as I've talked with you since last fall about it, the staffing shortfalls even when we are at full staff, and that our daily minimum staffing needs to change from 15 to 18. The council and the committees that I've passed through with that thus far have been very supportive. So far, we've passed it through Public Health and Safety, through HR, and now we sit at Finance Committee. I was presented to Finance in January with the proposal for hiring 12 additional. We had a very lucky timing thing occur for us. In December, the FEMA announced the opening of the SAFER grant application period beginning in January 4th, and it was going to be open for a very short period, open for 1 month. And what this SAFER grant is, the staffing for effective fire and emergency response, and it allows municipalities like ours to apply for federal funding to fully pay for firefighters for 3 years. And so it offers a bridge period to the community to adapt to having to pay for those additional firefighter paramedics. I know that grants have successfully worked inside the police department for onboarding people and provide that community that leg up. So at the Finance Committee in January, what was decided was that the city is going to fund 3 of the 12 positions immediately, and so we still don't have the funding source for that found. That's going to be occurring at some of the later Finance Committee meetings. But what they wanted to do is give me permission right away to write the SAFER grant. So in January, that spent the bulk of my time. I totally underestimated how long it was going to take to write that grant. I estimated 40 to 60 hours. I have well over 100 hours into writing that grant. It's a very complex grant in the fact that some of the data sets that you have to report, but then also the wording of the grant has to be extremely precise and a very short statements. Our financial need statement had to be under 4,000 characters, and it described the financial need of a community and why you needed this assistance inside of that, and answering 5 separate questions in there was very difficult. I had a lot of help from Mary Ann Grote and others. We got the grant done in time to send it for an expert review. Actually, the Firefighters Union, the International Association of Firefighters at their Washington, D.C. office offers expert grant review. Our union president was able to take the grant that I had written, submit it to them. They turned it around in about 40 hours. I submitted it on a Thursday evening, and we had it back Saturday morning, and they said that the grant was very well written, and they made a few comments for change, which of course then we rewrote and changed and submitted the grant ahead of time. So right now that sits in application status. I'm in conversation trying to determine if we can get some elected officials to write a few letters on our behalf. I don't think that hurts when we've got local elected officials writing letters of support to the ones that oversee the program. So with that said, while we have these 2 current openings, or 1 anticipated here at the beginning of March, the one that we do have open right now, we're also looking at hiring the first phase of these 12 off of this eligibility list. So which means we'd be looking to potentially hire 5 by the time we pass them through all of the, the stuff that the HR typically coordinates, the psych and the med and other things like that coming to see you. So we'd probably be looking May to June to onboard people, I would guess. So things are going well in that. I will tell you that I think that as I was tasked with this job, and that being the biggest battle to overcome was how we're going to solve this recruitment retention issue. And it's across the state. The Wisconsin Policy Forum wrote a really great report on it last fall about the problems facing fire and EMS service. I think that I was looking at a lot of technical answers to that, but I wasn't anticipating that our organizational culture that we have of the people inside of our department is what's shining through, and it's acting like a magnet that's pulling others from other departments. And so we're really hoping to set the gold standard for how we treat our employees, what the organizational culture is like. We're about to enter into contract negotiations this year. I think that once we get that box checked of having them adequately paid through that negotiation process, I think that we're going to become the beacon of how to solve that recruitment and retention issue. I've got a lot of optimism right now about it. You talked to me a year ago, and I had my head in my hands and had no clue how we were going to solve it. But I think that as along this path, we're learning that organizational culture, firefighters talk to firefighters in other communities, and they hear that. And when you're a young firefighter that's motivated, wanting to work for a community that supports you, and a department that properly equips you, properly pays you, we're gonna attract candidates, quality candidates. So that's my optimistic. I always look at the glass half full. Maybe in a few months from now, I won't have that same optimism. I hope it keeps carrying that way, but it certainly feels that way. So that's the end of my reports and what I had to add. Any questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I know it's been difficult and just difficult to get these positions filled. Has there been any interest either from female candidates or any diverse candidates?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things that we had talked about in December was trying to diversify the department. Inside that SAFER grant in January, I didn't have a lot of time to work on that project, but I will continue. Actually, we just hired another female candidate, Brooke Johnson. She's onboarded and working. I don't know what we have right now in this current application set. Both Jeremy and I have been in contact with a couple of minority candidates that are working through their education. And actually, Jeremy just had a meeting with one last week, gave him a tour of the department. We're offering ride-alongs. We're really trying to find the unique connections in the community to conduits for us to reach to, all the different minorities that are represented inside our community and show them the gateway, show them the doorway to a great career with our department. We're very fortunate in the fact that we've got North Central Technical College right here in our community, and I think that's a great pitch. If you'd like to work for us, you can go to the North Central Technical College, get your entire education that you need to work in our trade, in our field, and we hope you choose Wausau when you're done with that right here. COVID has been restricting the amount of student ride-alongs that we've had, but that's always been a great spot for potential candidates to take a look at us and for them to, for us to look at them while they do their EMT basic or their paramedic ride times clinicals. And so we're hoping with the COVID restrictions easing that we're going to see some of that. So to go back to the core of your question, I'm hoping that when we see this list of candidates that we do see some diversity in there. We hope we see some more female candidates, absolutely. I don't have an answer yet, so hopefully soon.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion from the commission?
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief. All right, next up, Chief Bliven with the monthly presentation of the police department.
Good morning. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about recruitment, just give you an update on where we are on that. We had a retirement in January. Detective Strobach retired, and so we have that vacancy. We had an officer that left for the Marathon County Sheriff's Office a couple weeks ago, so we have that vacancy. And then we have an officer who will be retiring in April, Paul Piscotti. So that will be 3 vacancies that we're currently recruiting for. We have a date set of March 13th for people to finalize and get their applications to us, and then we'll start the process from there. We've tried to reach out on Facebook. We've done some paid advertising in some larger communities like Minneapolis, Chicago, Milwaukee, and even the Pacific Northwest to see if there's anybody interested in coming to our beautiful town of Wausau to be a police officer. So that should be coming. You'll likely have recruits to you to be interviewed probably in May is our hope. We have a recruit school that starts up in Rhinelander in I think that's the end of May, or North Central Technical College starts in August. So we have to get our recruitments done by then so we can get them into the academy. So we're working diligently on that recruitment piece. I wanted to talk a little bit about Act 82 law changes because it does impact the Police and Fire Commission to some degree. Act 82 was signed into law by the governor in November, and it has to do with specific to police department personnel files and what's required for us to maintain and what's required for us in terms of if somebody comes and asks for a personnel file in a recruitment process, if they're going to be doing a background investigation on one of our officers, what's required of us as a police department to share with them. So we obviously do maintain an employment file. It isn't totally new to us, and those files are maintained in the Human Resources Office, but there are some things that we need to make sure that we have in that file. So we met last week with the Human Resources Director and the City Attorney and a number of us from the Police Department to talk about the personnel files and Act 82 and what's required. So just to give you an idea, the law requires us to have reviews, internal affairs and investigative files, discipline, substantiated complaints, commendations, and then it talks about psychological and fitness for duty evaluations, which typically haven't been a part of a personnel file. They've been part of a medical file. So we're talking through that to see if we need to change how we store those files and give access to other agencies if they're going to do a recruitment or a background investigation on one of our officers. So that means that if we're going to have a lateral transfer, we may have more access to files and personnel files on lateral transfer candidates into our police department. And I think the whole goal of this law change was to make sure that agencies aren't hiding officers who have bad conduct in their history, and so that it's easily identifiable. So it should be good for the profession. A lot of the things that we are already doing. And then the other piece of it that we don't do in Wausau, but I know there are some agencies across the state that do this. The law makes it illegal to have non-disclosure agreements with somebody who resigns in lieu of termination. So if there's bad conduct and an officer is being investigated and they resign in lieu of termination, they're not allowed to be offered a non-disclosure agreement, which would just say that if we go to ask that agency why they left, they wouldn't be able to tell us about that investigation and that non-disclosure. Those now are unlawful. Any non-disclosure, though, prior to the law being signed in November is still lawful and are still in place. We don't have any of those with any of our officers, though. Any questions on Act 82 or the law changes at all? Anything you wanted to throw in there, Tony? Okay. And then I just a tickler that this year our union contract expires at the end of this year, so we'll be starting negotiations probably July or August sometime. And there's been a lot of discussion around our department about pay specifically, so it's going to be an important contract for us to make sure that we get it right. So I've reached out and got all the contracts from all of our comparable agencies. I think there's 10 or 11 of them, and doing some work putting that together to see where we stand with those comparable agencies in terms of pay and benefits. Any questions on anything? All right, thanks.
All right, then our appreciation to the Fire and Police Department from the Commission. And before we move on to the next agenda item, I'm going to call a 15-minute break.